Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another ROPE webinar. This one is on how to get published in academic journals. I welcome everybody from literally all parts of the world this morning. For me. Um, so this is a talk that I've given many times, and it's proven to be very popular. What I would like to do is go over some of the main um, arguments that I have, and then encourage people to maybe share their experiences, and maybe I can shed light from the point of view of an editor, um, and um, and answer your questions. So let me begin with, when you are trying to submit a paper, the first thing you got to do is you've got to do um, find the proper journal. And that's the most important thing. I get so many articles that are just not a good fit for rope. For example, I get a lot of mainstream people who see the word political economy and they think, Journal of Political Economy, the review must be the same. And so that's not good. Also, if you send me a paper um, that is on, for example, feminist economics, for example. Now, I'm happy to publish absolutely papers on feminism and feminist economics, but there are journals that are specialized, as you know. So you have to ask yourself, does your paper stand a better chance of getting published in the Journal of Feminist Economics, for instance, or the Review of Political Economy? So you have to sort of wonder, or if you have a paper on development issues, is it too specific for rope? Does it belong better in a development journal? So, and I'll have a few things to say about that because someone sent me a question about that specifically. So you have to ask yourself, what is your paper about? Where does it belong most? And one thing you can often do is just look at your own references, who you're quoting and where they are publishing. And that should give you an indication if your paper is a good fit or not. ROPE is a generalized journal. We are ranked as a general paper, so we're not specifically about feminism or development or Latin American studies or African studies. So we are a general journal. So you have to ask yourself if your paper is a good fit. And that's just a little bit of, ask around. I saw on Twitter yesterday, someone posted, I've got a paper on this. What's the best journal I should send it to? Okay, so ask around, ask your professors, and also don't be afraid of asking the editor where you're sending it. He or she will be happy to give you an opinion. Second is paper length. I get a lot of papers that are way too long. In general, it's written in the instructions to authors for rope, 8,500 words. Some journals, it's about 7,500. I think JPKE says about 7,500. And that's important to respect because if you send papers that are too long, they're more difficult to fit into the production process. I mean, my journal, I have about 75,000 words. That's a whole issue. And, I don't like to bring out a journal that only has 5 papers in it published. It doesn't really look good. People pay money to subscribe to the journal. So I like to have about 8 papers, right? Well, 8 papers times, let's say, 8,000 words, that's 64,000 words. We're almost there. Got a couple of book reviews, maybe a note from the editor. The journal is done. If your paper is 13,000 words, it's more difficult to squeeze into an issue. So be aware of that. There are exceptions. I know that Ricardo has sent me papers that are very long, and I've agreed to send them, to publish them, not only because they're brilliant, but because there was a value added. A recent paper by Ricardo on, for example, Graziani was very, very, I thought, contributed significantly. But those are the exceptions. So try to keep your paper to about 8,500 words. And on top of that, if you have graphs and tables, each graph and each table is about 400 words in terms of space on a journal page. So if you have 10 tables, that's 4,000 words. If you send me a paper with an additional 8,000 words, that's 12,000, and that becomes a problem. So be very aware of how many tables you have, because they take up space. Because the way a journal works, I should specify, it's not just that I have about 75,000 words to work with, it's also the number of pages in the journal. And if I go over, then the journal has to pay extra to cover the costs of publishing an issue that is longer. And so, there's this business side, the publisher's side, that I'm bound to respect. So please be very mindful of the size of your paper. If you've got graphs, again, please, tables, graphs, black and white. Journals are not in color, costs too much. So if you have a paper that has graphs with different colors for the different lines and curves, well, we're going to have to fix that, and it's going to delay the production of the article. So be very mindful of that as well. Now, if you have tables and graphs, make sure they're your own. If they are not your own, you have to obtain permission. And the editor or the publisher will say, do you have permission to use this table? Okay. So if you have a table that says, as published in such and such author, you may have to get permission for that. Also, if these are your own, be ready to share your data. A lot of reviewers ask me all the time, where is the data? Be aware that that might happen. And if you refuse to, and that has happened to me last year, someone refused to share his or her data. I have no choice. I can't accept the paper. I can't, if you're not willing, that's part of the refereeing process. Since I'm on mathematical elements, make sure they're clear, go over them to make sure there's no mistakes. If I get a paper, now for rope, I do publish empirical papers, and increasingly so. I'm moving in that direction just because that's where the authors are moving into. People like myself and Ricardo, theoretical people, we're more and more dinosaurs. So a lot of young people are doing stock flow, and they're doing a lot of formalization. So I'm publishing more and more of those. So if I get something that's technical, I'm going to send it to a reviewer who is a specialist on in the theory, but I will certainly send it to someone who's very mathematically inclined or very, very able to judge the empirics, the model of your paper. And often it comes back that the model has, problems and weaknesses. Okay, so make sure you go over the math, the model, the equations, and all of that. Not second, but the quality of the English. I don't want to be insensitive to anybody whose English is not the first language, but it is an English journal. We publish in English. So the English must be good quality. And it's the responsibility of the author to make sure the paper has good English. So if you need to have it reviewed by a proofreader, that's something that is highly recommended. I work with someone, a proofreader, who's a retired professor from England, classics, history, but she's been doing this for me long enough that she certainly understands the lingo. And she's very competitive. If you need a reference, I'm happy to supply it. Now, this said, don't get the paper proofread before you submit it, unless you really are unsure of the quality of the English. I say that because if the paper is not accepted, then you would have spent about 150 euros. So just send it in as good English as you want, as long as it's not bad English, right? We understand each other. And then with the caveat that, I always tell reviewers, if the English is bad, that's not a reason to reject the paper, okay? And if the reviews come back, and I'll have a lot to say about the reviewing process, but if the reviews come back and they say, the English is not great, I'm fine with that. If I decide to reject the paper, it won't be because of the bad English. It's going to be for other reasons. But if it's a revise and resubmit, I will tell the author, this is a revise and resubmit. This may be a good time to get the paper proofread for better structure, better English. And that's a good investment. The woman I work with, she charges 155 euros, I think. It's a good investment, especially at this stage, okay? I'll have more to say on the revise and resubmit. References, I don't have much to say about this, except make sure that your references, make sure you include up-to-date references. You don't know how many times I get papers and the references on financialization, they end like 10 years ago. So make sure that you get some of recent references, because the reviewer that I send it to probably knows the literature, and most probably knows the literature. That's why I'm sending the paper to him or her, and they will point that out. And so make sure that you refer to the most recent literature. Plagiarizing, enough said, but I do want to raise the issue of self-plagiarizing. I consider self-plagiarizing just as bad as plagiarizing. If you send me a paper and you copy and paste 2 paragraphs from a paper you've already published, that's plagiarism. Even if it's your own research. So just be aware of self-plagiarizing. And what you can say there is, in a previous paper, this is what I said, and you can summarize it rather than copy and pasting. Okay, so be aware of plagiarizing. And if you plagiarize or self-plagiarize, you're banned from the journal. I mean, there's probably no greater sin for an academic to commit than to plagiarize. So be aware of that. And that's happened since I started Roque before that in 2011, I think, right? And that's happened twice in the last 9 years that I caught someone. And often it's also the referee who will catch it. Cases of self-plagiarizing. Now, also, I got a case this week. A woman sent me a paper. I apologize, I should not have specified the gender. Someone sent me the paper, that in English that had been published previously in another journal in another language. Um, if the paper is published, no matter which language, you can't translate it and then send it to an English-based journal. Okay, so be very aware of that. The paper's published, be happy with that. Now, what happened in this case, obviously the author would have liked to have his or her research published in English and reach a greater audience and all of that, and I understand that. But maybe you can put in the effort and write a slightly different version of the paper, with a little bit of extra to it, that it becomes somewhat different. Okay, and this, leads into the other argument advice: only submit your paper to one journal. And in the last 9, 10 years, maybe, well, I would say maybe once a year, I get a paper that's been submitted to another journal. How do I know that? When I choose referees, if I get a paper on financialization, well, several names come to mind immediately: Stockhammer, Hein, and a couple of others. So my first choice is probably going to be to send it to one of them. And the journal where the paper was also sent to, that's probably also going to be his or her first choice. And often what happens is the referee says, wow, I just refereed this paper last week, or I just got this paper last week from another journal. And so what happens in this case, you're banned from my journal, and then I contact the editor of the other journal, who then bans you from that journal as well. So, and to be clear, that has happened to big names as well. And so it's a big no-no. It's because we invest time in reading the paper, sending it to two referees. They invest time refereeing that, reading it. So if it's been submitted to two journals, you're wasting our time. So don't send it. Just send it to one journal. Wait for the answer. It can take 6 months. I'll get to that later, but just wait for the answer. And if it's rejected, then you send it to another journal. Okay, don't send it to a second journal. And I had a case last year where the paper was still under review with me, and it had already been published by the other journal. And so the other editor was pissed off and can't recant the paper, although we had a discussion about recanting the paper. And it didn't happen because it was a young scholar. We figured it was just a foolish mistake. But if your paper is recanted, imagine, right, what happens to your career. It gets known. It's very public. A recant is very public because there's a thing published in the journal. So just be careful of that, okay? Make sure your paper is in final form. I've gotten papers that are incomplete. You read through the paper and you see notes that the author puts in his or her paper: must return to this argument, must develop further. Yeah, make sure that your paper is in final form. And that requires you to reread yourself. And you have to reread yourself many times. What happened here is probably the author did not reread him or herself, or did so quickly. Okay, there's no rush. The editor is going to be there tomorrow. 1 or 2 days more won't make a difference. Take the time to reread yourself and make sure your paper is in final form. Make sure your paper is anonymous. try not to say, although I kind of use that as an example, but try not to say, I have said this elsewhere. Bracket Bellefiore, 1944. Sorry, Ricardo, I couldn't help but make the joke. So then you're telling the referees who you are, okay? And what if a referee doesn't like you? You've met the referee, you've pissed him off, her off at a conference, something, you asked the wrong question at a conference. Okay, so just try to have your paper be sort of anonymous. So just instead of saying, in another paper I've said, just say, for example, Goes in 2020 has said this, and that's it. Okay, so make it anonymous. And as you get older, you make enemies, you make friends, you make enemies, and lots of people don't like me. So, you know, if I send in a paper that says, Rochon, I've said this, and it turns out to be someone that doesn't, that we don't get along with for theoretical reasons or whatnot. Okay, so, and that's happened to me, so lesson learned. Let me say a few things about your introduction. This ties in with a question I got by email. Which part of the paper do I read the most? Well, certainly the introduction is certainly, I mean, I don't read every paper that comes in, okay? I'm not gonna waste my time reading a paper that will probably get rejected, that might get rejected. I read papers once, I get the reports back, and it's a revise and resubmit. Then I'll read the paper and I'll make my own opinion on about that. But I do, before I send it to referees, I do read the introduction, because the introduction, if well written, the introduction tells me everything I want to know about the paper, and will give me ideas of who to send it to. Okay, so a good introduction should be should spell out clearly your arguments. And you know, it has happened where referees said the paper is completely disconnected from the introduction, and I don't know how that can happen. How an author can write an introduction that doesn't stick with the paper. But it does happen. And so you have to be aware that your introduction has to clearly say what the paper is about, what the paper will do, and how it will do it, without giving too much away, because it's an introduction. Okay. When I talked to you about rereading yourself, you have to be very critical, and that's probably very difficult, because we all love what we write, and we all think what we write is perfect. And I'll give you an example. I'm giving a talk next week, and my introductory remarks, I have like 5 minutes to give introductory remarks, and I wrote them down and I sent it to someone, and as I wrote, read them over, I said, oh wow, this is great. And I sent it to someone that I trust a lot, and the person wrote back saying, it's trash. You don't have to say this. Half your introduction, you're wasting. You only have 5 minutes. Don't say this. Don't say that. Don't say that. Go straight to the right. So, yeah, it happens to the best of us. You have to be very self-critical, and with experience, hopefully, you get better at that. But, are you just repeating yourself? And you have to be aware of that. Referees will always comment on the writing, the quality of the English, but the writing. It's repetitive. It's repetitive. It's repetitive. There you go. For sakes, I repeated myself. Good. Okay, so you send me, now the paper's in great form. It's the final form. The math has been looked at. You reread yourself. Your references are up to date. Don't pad your references. Don't put stuff in your references that you don't quote in your text, because they will be eliminated. And it might actually look bad on you from the referee's point of view. Are you trying to pull the wool over our eyes by putting people in your references that are not in your text, right? Are you padding your references? So all of that, your paper in final form, you send it to me. I get it. I skim through it. I read the introduction. I decide who to send it to. 2 referees, maybe 3 referees. Maybe if the paper is highly mathematical or empirical, I might send it to 2 empiricists. So, you know, but never one. Most journal will send it to 2 people. And what I do, I skim the paper to make sure that it is anonymous. I take out your name, your affiliation, the people you thank, anything like anything that might give you a. Then I choose and then I send it to referees. Now, here becomes the refereeing process. I want to say right off the bat, there's probably no other comments, angry comments I get from authors that than about the refereeing process. Referees didn't read my paper, referees didn't understand my paper, referees, okay. First of all, it's not a perfect process. Referees are not perfect. For the record, I have rejected referee reports. Now, I believe that every author deserves 2 good referee reports. I do not accept referee reports that are 1 paragraph long. This is a bad paper, not worth my time refereeing. That's not fair to the author. If it's a bad paper, the author deserves to know why, how, and how to improve the paper. Those are the guidelines I will often give referees, okay? So I will choose 2 good referees or that I think are good referees. And I expect 2 good reviews from them. Now, starting in January, I'm going to change the format a little bit. There's going to be a form, and there's going to be boxes that they must tick. But it will also have a place where the referee summarizes the paper according to him or herself. And at least that gives the author the knowledge that, yes, okay, the referee did understand my paper because here's his summary of the paper, okay? So I get 2 reports back. Different journal editors might have a different answer to this, but if I get 2 bad reviews, the paper is going to be rejected. If I get a really good review and a really bad review, this for me, and this is where other editors might differ, I like that because what I think is that the paper solicited strong passions, pro and con. And so if I publish it, the paper might actually get quoted for good reasons and for bad reasons. In a recent paper, Najib Khan wrote this, he's wrong. But the paper gets quoted. And for me, that sort of leads to a good dynamic, because then I would probably invite Najib to write a response. Right? And then it gets a little dialogue and, you know, so that's good from an editor's point of view. Often and then I'll make my decision when I read the paper and I'll go, you know what, I like this paper. I see the negative reviews, but I like it. I think it would make a good paper. So I might ask for a revise and resubmit at that point. Or I might decide to send to a 3rd reviewer. And the 3rd reviewer might come back and say, great paper. Then good. 2 pros, 1 con. Or bad paper. 2 cons, 1 pro. Okay. With respect to decisions, if it's a revise and resubmit, it's not a guarantee for publication, but it is this. The editor is telling you, hey, I'm interested in your paper and I would like to publish it, but you have to do a little bit more work. This is what a revise and resubmit is. I'm not going to waste my time, you know, dealing with a paper that doesn't have a chance of getting published at the end of the process. So I must be convinced that there's a sufficient probability, high probability, that the paper might actually eventually be published. That's what a revise and resubmit is. And so the onus is now on you to make your paper better. And what you must do now at this point is you must answer every point raised by both referees. Every point. Either in your paper or in an accompanying letter. So when you send me your revised version, I will ask you to send me back a letter explaining what you did to deal with every point. And the best way in that letter is to say, referee 1, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it may be that you don't agree with point 4. And that's fine. I don't expect you to agree with everything the referees say, because after all, it's your paper, it's your research, your opinion. But you have to deal with it. So you have to either incorporate something in the paper. So point 1, you say, yeah, good point. This is what I did. I added this in the paper. Point 2, same thing. Point 4, I disagree, and this is why. The referee won't be insulted that you disagreed with him. If anything, he or she will, admire that. But it does show that you dealt with the criticism. So many referees say to me, author didn't deal with half my points. And that puts me in a very difficult position. Okay, so this is, next to writing a good paper, this is, writing the better paper is what will get you published or not. And if you don't deal with the referee comments, you don't stand a good chance of getting published. Okay, don't give referees reasons to reject your paper. Deal with what they say, okay? Either in the paper or in the letter, okay? Let me say something about editor's decision. I was going to make a joke like, oh, editors, we're like Trump, we have all the final word. No, but the editor's word is the final word. And, yeah, maybe you don't like the decision, but it's just part of this process. And don't start arguing with the editor. I've had people argue with me and say things like, you're obviously a bad editor and your journal is obviously not good quality because you're obviously passing a great paper that will go down in history as being the best paper ever written. Yeah, I get those arguments, actually. And then inevitably what happens, 6 months later, the same author sends me a paper saying, oh, can you consider this? What do you want me to do? I'm only human. What do you want me to do? And say, oh, yeah, I forgive you for calling me names. Yeah, I'll spend my time and I'll send that out now, for sure. So, publishing is also about relationships. And if you start accusing the editor of all sorts of stuff, it's probably not a good way to go. Okay. I have, and editors, we talk to each other, and we say, oh yeah, have you, I'm going to try to use someone else's name here. Louis-Maxime, who's a good friend of mine. Oh yeah, hey, editor of this and this journal. Have you had any problems with Louis-Maxime Joly? Oh yes, my God, he's so difficult. Okay, so don't get the reputation of being a difficult author. Okay, just thank the referee. Sorry, thank the journal editor saying, okay, I'm sorry you reached this decision. I understand, thank you. And I hope that the reports that you got, let's say I did not invite you for a revise and resubmit. I got the reports and I rejected the paper. Use those reports to make the paper better, okay? Not 2 months ago, I got a paper for rope and I sent it to a referee who said, hey, I refereed that paper 6 months ago. And guess what? The author did nothing with my comments. The author had just sent me the exact same paper with no changes. And like I said, the pool of referees is very small. I happened to send it to the exact same referee. And so he was super annoyed that, he wasted his time writing a report that the author didn't use. And that happens a lot. If your paper gets rejected, use the reports anyways to make your paper better, because it might be sent to the same reviewer. And in this case, and for me as an editor, it raises question. What if I ask you to revise and resubmit? Are you going to do the work? Are you going to put the effort in doing a revise and resubmit, or are you going to do just a few things, cosmetic? So, I have to think about my time. I got to think about the time of the referees. And those referees, they get asked all the time to referee papers. So, if they agree to referee a paper, they're committing time, and we're all busy. So take those reports and make your paper better, even if your paper is rejected. So I said, don't argue with the editor. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to the editor to see where your paper is in terms of the process. But, give us time. I think if you haven't heard back, and I cannot speak here for other editors, but if you haven't heard back from me in 3 months, 4 months, by all means, email me and say, hey, where's my paper? A bit more politely. But, just wondering where my paper is. I sent it to you 3 months ago. So the way I do it is I send the paper. So it used to be that when I got a paper, I sent it out same day. I can't do that anymore. I'm too busy. So it might take up a week to be sent out. And then I ask referees to return to me a review in 6 weeks. So now you're talking 7 weeks has gone by. Inevitably, the reviewer will ask for a week or two more. With COVID, things slow down. People have kids at the house they got to deal with, etc. So you're talking about 10 weeks, best case scenario. So I would say, yeah, 3 months. Send me an email saying, I'm just wondering where my paper is in the production process, and I'll say to you. And often that will act as a reminder to me to send an email to the referee, the outstanding referee or referees, and say, hey, you promised me a review by now. Where is it? And okay. And then, that's the best case scenario. After 10 weeks, a referee will sometimes tell me, can't do it anymore. I don't have the time anymore. So now I've got to find another referee. And the other referee might want 6 weeks. So you're now talking about 16 weeks, 17 weeks, 18 weeks, and that's 5 months, okay? Now, I have a couple of referees, secret referees who I won't say, who will write me a review within a day or two because I asked them. Hey, can you drop everything for me, please, and write a review in 2 days? And they'll do it because they're good friends, people I've worked with. And so that works, but that's not always the case. I know that if anyone is in Italy, young scholars in Italy, I know that November is the accreditation month, so they need papers published before November. I'm very aware of that. Sometimes the young scholars on the job market, and apparently DOIs don't even work anymore. They don't count for anything anymore. So they need, so as long as the paper is published online. And so I have people who tell me I'm on the job market in February coming up, and I just accepted the paper. Will it get published in time? And yeah, I mean, 4 months usually is time, but let's say we're December. And so then I'll try to work with the production team to, because they got to review the paper and do their thing and send it back to the authors with queries and et cetera. So there's another process there. But if you up on the job market or et cetera, I'm going to try my best. If you tell me in advance, and that will give you, you know, maybe quicker process. And the production team has been good working with me on a faster timetable when that happens. And so more often than not, I can get your paper published online. It's not yet in an issue of the journal, but it's published online, and that apparently is all that matters. So do let me know if that's the case. And then two more things before I get to your questions. Ask advice. You know, don't hesitate if you get the reports back. And the reports are often contradictory, of course. One likes your paper, one doesn't. One loves section 2, and the other one thinks it should be cut. So don't hesitate to ask the editor, what do you want? What do I want? What do you want me? What do I want from your paper? How do I interpret? How do I reconcile those reports? And I will often tell you, you know, and plus I know who the referees are. And they're referees that I know they're good referees. And what they say, you know, I would be a fool to ignore. And there are other referees that I know, and they're good referees. All the referees are good, I'd like to think. But, you know, there are referees that are not very, you know, they don't like to be harsh. You know, so they'll go, oh yeah, no, it's good, no, it's good. And so I have to read between the lines, and sometimes the referees have sent me emails, right? Here's the paper, between you and I, this is what I really think, but they're afraid to put it in the report. So ask advice. What would you do? And I'll tell you, you know, referee 1, I think, makes a better case. Don't ignore referee 2, but really pay attention to referee 1. Okay, so that should be good. Now, one last comment. Get involved. Contact editors. Send me emails. Hey, I'm a young faculty, and I'm a young faculty. I would love to review for your journal. I don't know everybody, and my job is to know everybody. I'd love to be able to say I know everybody, but I don't. And so I'd love to have people volunteer to referee. I'd love that. Then you get involved with the journal. And I'm going to be changing the editorial board soon. There's going to be some changes. And you know, there's a couple of people out there. They are young faculty, and one in particular in the U.S. And I've asked her to review, I think, 3 papers in the last year. She's done excellent job. So I've invited her to be a member of the editorial team board of the journal. And so you get involved, you get to know the editor, and, you know, at some point, yeah, you'll get, especially rope now, my new rule starting January will be, if you're a member of the editorial team, you're there for 3 years. Renewable, maybe I might decide to keep you on board. But the reason is I want to bring other people on board. I want it to be very dynamic. The JPKE, the Journal of Post-Keynesian Economics, had 2 dead people on its editorial board. So, you know, I want to keep the journal fresh. I want to keep the journal dynamic. There are a lot of wonderful young scholars doing wonderful work. I want to get them involved in the journal. And I think that that's where it begins. Send the editor an email, your CV, tell him or her your areas of expertise, and I've got a grid that I'm working on. Financialization. Oh, there you go. Oh, now I've got 15 people I can send a paper to for reviewing. Okay. If you get the chance to, if someone asks you to review a paper, say yes, because it does lead to other stuff. It does lead to other stuff. It leads to you possibly becoming a member of the editorial board or an associate editor of a journal. So it's good for your career, and it shows when you do. I don't know if you do annual reports where you are, but I have to, and you know, all these little activities does look good on your CV. That you know everyone has on in their CV refereeing activity and all the list of journals. Mark Lavoie is like half a page long. So it does look good. Try to say yes. I know it's time consuming, but try to say yes if you can, especially if you're a young faculty. I think it can lead to other stuff. Now, before I take your questions, I've had a couple of questions sent to me. Which part of the paper I read the most? Like I said, the introduction for sure when I get it in. And if it's to the point where I'm going to ask you to revise and resubmit, I go through the paper, okay, the entire paper. And I also read, of course, the referee comments, and I have those comments in mind when I read your paper. And now this other question. Oh, hey. Whoa, okay. So, question is this. And I have some things to say, good and bad, about it. And I got an earful the other day. And when do I think a paper is too country specific? Wow, that's a tough question. I got a paper the other day. I'm not going to say what about it. I'm going to invent something because I don't want to give it away in case you see it online. The political economy of selling food on the streets in India. And I turned down the paper because I thought it was just a little bit too specific, too country specific, not only but topic specific. Again, it's a question of fit. I thought that paper belonged in a development journal. That's what I thought. And then but I did seek advice, and I sent it to someone. And the author was a woman, and I say that because it plays into the argument. And the person I sent the paper for advice, not to referee, but just to say, what do you think? Is this too specific? She told me that, I said, I'm thinking of rejecting it. And she said, you're a white man. This is a paper by a Black woman, and you have the opportunity of, making her career by, helping her. And so I got into this argument about that. And so it does put the editor, these are difficult, this is what I'm trying to say, these are difficult decisions. And I have the opportunity of being a different kind of editor, et cetera, by not desk rejecting papers by Black women. So it got into sort of this race, and I thought that was unfortunate. Of course, I don't mind if people are color, gender, anything, right? But it's the topic that I had difficulty with. And then the person said, well, the topic is often linked to gender and race, and I get it. But at the end of the day, the journal is still a general paper, a general journal. And I thought that paper, the topic was too specific, and it belonged in a development paper, a journal. Now, it raises the question, okay, well, where do I draw the line? I've published paper on Brazil. I've published papers on India. I've published, and I think it's not as much the country specific nature of the paper that worries me. It's often the topic that's too, if the topic is a general topic, and then the case of Brazil. Brazil is a big country. It certainly speaks for Latin America in terms of importance, even developing countries in general. And the topic is general enough. But if the topic is too specific, and for that same reason, if someone sends me a paper, I'm going to invent something here, you know, the political economy of farming wheat in the United States. The topic is too specific, although the country, it's the United States and everything, but it's the topic that's too specific. So when I reject a paper because it's not a good fit, it's often because of the topic, not because of the geography or the country specificity of the paper. Okay, that I wanted to say, and I hope that I didn't offend. But these are difficult. You know, editors have difficult decisions to make often. Okay, okay. So that's it. If anyone has any questions, maybe personal experiences that they've had, I would be more than happy to listen. You've got a hand at the bottom of the chat box. So I see Elon has got a question. Elon has been on many of my webinars. He's very familiar with the hands. But at the, oh, there they are. They've discovered the hands. Bottom of your chat box, press on the hand, and I'll be able to call on you. Elon, do you want to unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you so much, Philip. I have a question first regarding staying anonymous, especially when we think of the working papers.
Yes.
For example, we mostly publish our works in form of working papers in advance, then submit. But the referees can Google the title and find it, and then I'm not sure, but it is the risk that they make some biased decisions or their comments on it can be. How can we deal with it? First question, should we not publish in advance as working paper? Or secondly, there are, of course, limited numbers of heterodox journals. And that's why I would ask, how long has to have passed over the last publication in the journal to publish again in the same journal? Once I was rejected because of that reason, I don't disagree. Yes, I can appreciate it. But I was advised to wait to have another time.
Okay. Listen, I'd love to gossip with you and find out what journal that is. Let me answer your second question. I'll publish 2 papers of yours in the same journal, in the same issue, if it just happens like that. Look, I've published La Voix in one issue. In the next issue, I publish another paper. I have no problems with that. It says nothing about the quality of the journal. It says nothing about, you know, I have authors who will send me 2 papers at the same time. You know, it doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened. All right. So yeah, no, I'm not going to make you wait 6 months or, you know, if you have 2 good papers and they're both accepted. And, you know, as I'm, you know, we publish 4 times a year. And so 2 months before, I go over my backlog of articles and I go, okay, which article could go in this issue? And I put articles together and, you know, I've got a spot, I've got 5,000 words left to fill. And your second paper happens to be a note and it's 4,500 words. I'll put it in there. That doesn't bother me. Okay. Your paper was went through both papers went through the legitimate process of refereeing. There's no reason to have it legitimized as in the journal as two papers published in different, back-to-back issue. Or your second, your first question. Okay, so you're not going to like the first part of my answer, and then the second part is fine. Let me answer the second part. I most often I change the title of the paper that I get. So in my spreadsheet, which I would share with you, but it's got all the information. But under the spreadsheet, it's going to say paper by Nina Highcacker. Is it Highcacker? Highcacker?
iHacker.
iHacker. So I'm going to say Nina Highcacker and the title of her paper. But then when I send it to a referee, it might just say paper on this. Okay? And that's precisely why I do that. I also send referees only PDF papers, because if I send them Word papers, if you look into the, what do you call it? If you go into Word paper and you look under properties, you're going to see, often you might see the author's name. So I do take the necessary precautions. I don't think other editors will go through the trouble of changing the title of the paper, though. I haven't heard other editors say that, but I do that. And whereas in the first part, so the problem with working papers, I just sent an email yesterday to an author saying, take all the working papers down. The problem is publishers, right? They're in the business of selling journals. It's their business. And if there's a working paper here, and paper published here in the journal, the publisher doesn't want you to quote this paper. They want you to quote the paper in the journal because it helps the impact factor and all of that, right? There's a whole industry of empirics and numbers behind that. And they want you to quote that paper. Now, the latest thing now for journals is what's called, I forget the name. The alt metric. And, I've been instructed. So you've noticed that I promote a lot of the articles on social media. And I do it to promote the journal, but I also do it to promote individual papers, because each time the paper is retweeted or mentioned on, let's say, Twitter or Facebook, the paper gets points called alt metrics. And these alt metrics tell how much of an impact that paper is having. So the recent paper by Steve Keynesian, and so a good paper for Rope will get 30 as an alt metric. Anything above that is really good, like bonus, good paper. Steve Keynesian, his latest paper on the criticism of neoclassical environmental theory, that it just caught the Twitter by storm. The alt metric is 1,600. I mean, I've never seen a paper like that. And where does that help? It also helps the author, because I see, for example, when I apply for a grant, in my grant, I'll say, my grant is on, monetary policy and income distribution and gender. And, this paper of mine has an alt metric of, 25. And so I use the alt metric to, when I apply for grants, and to show that, my paper, or potentially this research that you're going to fund, potentially will have an impact, because look at the impact some of my other papers have had. Okay, so I would take down the working papers, and the editor might actually ask you to do that. I will often, text the title precisely to see if it's a working paper somewhere. So it's in your best interest, I think, just to take them down if you're going to submit. It's just the nature of the business. Okay, Davide, please unmute yourself.
Hi, Louis-Philippe, and thanks a lot for the very interesting conversation we are having today. I have a very quick question that is, how long usually is the second round of revision? Is it faster than the first one, or how long does it take approximately, if there is any pattern? Thanks.
Good question. So when I send the paper out, I ask the authors, I said, look, you've read this paper already. Please get back to me within 4 weeks. So it is a little bit, on paper, a little bit better. Often, I won't send it back to referees. I will look at the paper, in conversations with the author. Elon writes to me and says, oh, I took everything under consideration. Oh my God, I dealt with everything. And, so I might give the paper a read compared to the letter that you accompany and how you dealt with, and I might just be happy and satisfied with that. Okay. Now that doesn't happen all the time because it's too much work for me. I'd rather the editor, the reviewers do it, but I might do that. So, it all depends. If I think seems to have done a good job, I'll read your letter and, so, but yeah, the second round should be a little bit faster. We're hoping, but again, what happens here is that COVID struck. And at the beginning of COVID in March, April, May, June, forget it. Everything was out the window in terms of refereeing process. I had referees in Italy, especially in Italy, write to me and say, oh, I'd love to do this in 4 weeks, but I lost 2 aunts, 2 uncles, 4 cousins to COVID, and my neighbor. And so, that was but those are extraordinary times, and we're still in these times. So, like I said at the beginning, things might have slowed down a little bit, but don't lose hope. Okay, John.
Hi, Louis-Philippe, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting, the things you said. I have just a couple of questions. They're more like details. The first question I would like to ask is related to say in the review process, you receive like a lot of comments and they suggest that you add a bunch of points, and then how you deal with this and with the size of the length of the paper. I mean, if there is like how you proceed on this situation. The second point is there is, for instance, you are writing an empirical paper, and then you come to, you have a lot of tests, and you want to do like check the robustness of all of your results, for instance, and then how is the policy say to suggest an online appendix, a file that you think it doesn't fit to the body of the paper, but you would like to see it online somewhere, as it supports the paper. And then finally, related to that is the question of anonymity and the data, because many journals suggest you to have your data somewhere with DOI code, but then if you get online with the DOI code, it will be it will be linked to your name, so it will be not anonymous anymore. So yeah, thank you for presentation again.
Thank you. Regarding the first point, yeah, I get that all the time. The paper's already at 9,000 words, and the referee wants you to add another, 1,000, add a section, and that happens all the time. And this is a good opportunity to just talk to the editor. Sir or madam, what would you do? I would have to add, and then, and that happens a lot. And I'll tell the author, that's fine. Go for it. Try to cut elsewhere maybe, but don't worry and send me back a version with 9,500 words. I'm okay with that. Okay, so talk to the editor. As for the appendix, I understand what you say. It supports the paper. It's a question of length. It's a question, you know, these are issues are not that, you know, I guess vary from one. It depends on the length of the appendix as well. If the appendix is 5 pages, you know, it's complicated. And then this might be a good part to talk about the fit of the paper. There are fit with the journal. There are some journals who will publish bigger pieces, longer pieces with, you know, long appendices, and you may want to send your paper there. And as for rope, I think it's just a case by case. You say to the editor, here's my paper. In the eventuality that the paper is accepted, I would like to publish, you know, an appendix to support the paper. And you talk to the editor about it. I'm open to it. Me. I'm not sure about other editors. And as for the anonymity, it's been my experience that the referees have asked, and I've sent it, I've asked the author who sent it to me by email, and I sent it by email. So I don't reveal is that correct? If I understand, that does not reveal the identity of the author. Okay, and I should say, you know, rope is double blind. I am thinking of going to a triple blind process, which means that even I don't know the name of the author. The paper gets sent to an assistant who takes out the name, and then I attribute it to referees without knowing who the author is. So I'm thinking about that. So I want to try to make it as anonymous and fair and as possible. Okay, Najib has a question.
First of all, thank you so much. You are doing a great service to this academic community.
Thank you.
And we all appreciate it, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very quick and brief questions. First, should we expect from January the frequency of rope from quarterly to monthly?
No.
That's a wish. That's a wish list. Eh?
What are you talking about?
Because we want our papers to be published. Eh?
Yeah.
Second, what would you advise? I mean, I already submitted a paper or two with 9,000-10,000 words, and I wish I had listened to you long time ago. And now what should I kind of revisit and resubmit, or just wait?
You know, Bob Heilbronner, I came to know him quite well, and he gave me a quote for a little popular book I published back in 1992, I think, or 3 or something like that. But Bob always told me a couple of things. He said, don't try to impress people with your writing. Impress them with your ideas. So he was not a fan of convoluted, difficult sentences. But he also told me once, if a paper's too long, it's got nothing to say. Meaning, you know, if your paper, and of course that doesn't apply to all papers, but if your paper is 10, 11,000 words, often, if you're self-critical, and this is often what I tell people, well, you actually have 2 papers in here. You have 3 papers in here. Each paper is like 5,000 words. So often I think that what lurks behind these very long papers are 2 papers. That, you know, the author is very proud to submit, and it's a great accomplishment, and all that is very true. But it's probably, you're probably better off breaking it, and then you have 2 papers, and then reworking them a little bit, right? But yeah, this is what I personally think. You know, and I suspect that's most of the cases. because, you know, section 3 can be, my God, that's a whole new paper. So that's what I think. Okay, I hope I answered your question. Anybody else? Does anyone else have a paper, a question, have a comment, an experience they want to share?
I have a question,
Yes,
Professor.
who's speaking?
Santiago.
Oh, yeah.
Gana.
Yeah.
So thank you for your talk. In case you have a paper rejected and you want to publish in that particular journal, you can change it and then send it again, or it's like no? Okay.
No, I get that all the time. You know, I hate to call it a game, but you know, publishing is a game, you know, and there are rules. And once the paper is rejected, it's rejected. And unless the paper is noticeably different, and that can happen, then perhaps, then, you know, send me an email. Hey, I know you rejected this paper, but I've really changed it. And it's maybe just 50% what it was. And I think it, you know, and this is where, and I don't want to say that, I don't want to give the illusion that there's a buddy-buddy system, but, you know, this is where getting involved with the journal or the editors is a good thing. If it's someone that I've never heard of before, and I don't know that person, versus someone I know I've met at conferences, or someone who's refereed for me before, you know, I might be more inclined, you know. If it's a young scholar, I might be more inclined. I just wrote to someone yesterday. Oh, yes. I wrote to someone yesterday, and so you're going to accuse me of being a liar and a hypocrite. But the author is a very young scholar, and he or she told me the paper has been accepted as a working paper in the Asian Development Bank. May he or she post it there. And despite everything I told you, I did say yes. This is the compromise. First, a young scholar who's going on the job market. An ADB working paper will look nice. I said, have it as a working paper until I decide to, if I decide to publish it, then you take it down. So this is sort of the compromise I've reached with this young author. So, you know, it, like I said, ask advice, talk to the editor, get involved, you know, and if you're a young scholar, you know, there are ways that we maybe, I got a very soft spot for young scholars. It's tough to get published, it's tough to get jobs, especially in COVID. And if I can do anything to help, I will. And that explained a lot what I did this week about that Asian Development Bank working paper. But I'm not going to do that all the time. I'm not going to do that for people who have jobs or are tenured. You know, if you're tenured, you know, that doesn't matter as much. You know, the journal publication will count more. But in this case, it might make a difference. And for me, that's important. John.
I have one more question, since there's not many. Is there any situation if like that you could argue with the editor? Say you receive a rejection based on a review that you, I mean, it's not something that you just feel that the person is really wrong. So there is, or you just whatever, you know, take it as it is and send somewhere else.
Yeah. So, so I did say my word is the last word. If you feel very strongly, you can write, you know, a letter explaining why. And the reason I didn't mention it is because usually these arguments I don't like to get into, because the author inevitably says to me, and it degenerates, and you're a bad editor, what a crappy journal, and you should do a better job getting better referees, and that's why I don't like to entertain these. But if you do it, it's all in the way you do it. Dear editor, thank you for the reports. They're very good, but report one, I don't say I think you made a mistake, but because then I'm just gonna get just say I would like the opportunity to explain to you why I think maybe the referees. Don't say the referees were wrong. The referees might have rushed to judgment. Say it in a constructive way, and if you're open to having a discussion, that might end up in no. And it has happened to me. That I've told the person, okay, I will send it to a third referee. Say that, suggest that. Say, would you mind sending it to a third referee? Okay, so that avoids me the discussion with the referees. Hey guys, geez, John wrote to me, and okay, then they're gonna get their backs up. But if you suggest to the journal editor, would you mind sending it to a third referee, and I will accept the decision. I think that's more constructive. That's healthier. Okay? Does that answer your question? No? Okay, good. Any other questions? If that is it, well, I'm going to bring this to an end. Thank you very much, everybody. It was great. Thank you for the great questions. I hope this was good. I hope you learned something. If you want to send me an email to talk more about something more up, I get one more question I'll take. Betul.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Last question. Hi, how are you?
Good.
So I was just going to ask, is it ethically correct to use the same theoretical model? For example, if you're writing an empirical paper, but you're using the same theoretical model that you have already published, but the main results of the paper are empirical anyway. Just wanted to ask this.
So you use the same model as in the paper before, but
yeah, the same theoretical model, yeah.
But what's different? The analysis, the conclusions?
So for example, the first theoretical model that you have published has no empirical parts, but you're writing another paper that has a theoretical model plus an empirical part as well.
Of course, absolutely.
You can use, right? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, the paper is a continuation of another one. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so that will then preclude, the last question went to Betul. Thank you very much, everyone. I will be posting this online on Rope's YouTube channel. Make sure you like and you share and everything. Good luck with your careers. Good luck with your papers. And I hope this was informative. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.